The Amazon rainforest in eastern Peru is not one forest. It is a structure built in layers. The canopy rises 100 feet above the ground, thick enough in places to hold back rain. Beneath it lies the understory, dim even at midday. Below that, the forest floor, damp, crawling, shaded in permanent twilight. Water moves through everything. It pools in the leaves. It runs in rivulets down bark. It carves streams through soil that has never fully dried. This forest is not silent. Insects hum in shifting frequencies. Birds call from high branches, invisible. Somewhere farther out, a howler monkey groans, the sound rolling through the canopy like distant thunder. The heat is constant. It does not break. The air is thick with moisture, and it clings to skin, to cloth, to breath. The jungle near the Ucayali River basin is unbroken for hundreds of miles. There are no roads, no towns. A few indigenous communities live along the rivers, but between them lies only green. From above, the forest appears soft, like moss. It is not. The canopy hides the density below, the vines that loop and choke, the roots that twist over one another, the thorns that catch and tear. It is a place built to remain. It does not welcome entry, but it does not resist it either. It simply continues. A person can walk for days and see nothing but trees. They can follow water and still find nothing. The jungle is neutral. It does not notice whether something lives or dies within it. Juliane Koepcke was 17 years old. She had been born in Lima, but she had not grown up entirely in the city. Her parents were German zoologists who had moved to Peru in the 1950s to study the rainforest. Her father, Hans Wilhelm Koepcke, and her mother, Maria Koepcke, had established a research station called Panguana, deep in the Peruvian Amazon. Juliane had spent much of her childhood there. She knew the jungle. She had walked its trails. She had learned to recognize its sounds, its dangers, its patterns. By 1971, she was attending school in Lima, preparing to graduate. Her mother had been in the city with her for the final school events of the year. Now, on December 24th, they were returning to Panguana to spend Christmas with her father. The plan was simple: a short commercial flight from Lima to Pucallpa, a city on the edge of the jungle, and from there, a smaller trip to the research station. The flight was LANSA Flight 508. LANSA, or Líneas Aéreas Nacionales Sociedad Anónima, was a Peruvian airline. It was not known for luxury. It served routes that larger airlines avoided, short hops over mountains and jungle, connecting remote cities to the capital. The aircraft was a Lockheed L-188A Electra, a turboprop plane that seated around 90 passengers. On this flight, there were 86 passengers and 6 crew members. Juliana and her mother boarded in Lima shortly after noon. The weather had been discussed. There were storms over the Andes and the jungle beyond. Some passengers had hesitated. But the flight was scheduled, and delays were common. Most chose to board. Juliana sat beside her mother in the cabin. She did not feel afraid. She had flown this route before. The plane departed Lima and climbed east toward the mountains. For a time, the flight was uneventful. Then, as the Electra crossed into the airspace above the rainforest, it entered a thunderstorm. The turbulence began gradually, then worsened. The plane shook. Passengers gripped their armrests. Some prayed. Juliana looked out the window and saw lightning branching through the clouds. The wings tilted sharply. The cabin lights flickered. Her mother held her hand. The Lockheed Electra was a sturdy aircraft, but it was not built to withstand prolonged exposure to severe weather. The storm the plane had entered was a towering cumulonimbus system, the kind that forms rapidly over the Amazon during the wet season. Inside such storms, wind shear and lightning are constant. Visibility drops to nothing. Ice can form on the wings. At approximately 12:30 p.m., the aircraft was flying at around 21,000 feet, nearly 2 miles above the jungle canopy. Witnesses on the ground later reported seeing the plane descend through the clouds, trailing smoke. Others heard an explosion. The exact cause of the breakup was never definitively established. The official investigation suggested that lightning struck the plane, igniting a fuel tank in the right wing. The wing separated. The fuselage began to disintegrate. Inside the cabin, passengers experienced a sudden, violent loss of pressure and structure. The noise was overwhelming. Metal tore, wind rushed in, seats broke free from their bolts. Juliane remembered looking out the window and seeing the jungle spinning below her. She remembered her mother beside her, and then she remembered nothing. The plane did not crash as a single object. It came apart in mid-air. Pieces of fuselage, luggage, bodies, and seats fell separately, scattered across miles of forest. The main wreckage would later be found in several locations, some of them miles apart. Juliane Koepcke fell from the disintegrating aircraft, still strapped to a row of 3 seats. She was alone in that row. The seat bench tumbled through the air, spinning, dropping through more than 2 miles of open sky. She lost consciousness during the fall. She did not remember the impact. The canopy slowed her descent. Branches broke. Leaves cushioned the final moments. The seat struck the forest floor, and she lay there, unconscious, alone. Juliane woke on the ground. It was morning, December 25th. She had been unconscious for nearly a full day. Her first sensation was pain. Her right eye was swollen shut. Her collarbone was broken. She could feel it, her sharp grinding whenever she moved her shoulder. There were cuts on her arms and legs. Her body ached in ways that had no specific source. She was still strapped to the seat. The 2 seats beside her were empty. The jungle pressed in around her, green, dense, humid. She could hear birds. She could hear insects. She tried to stand, but her legs barely held her. She sat back down and looked around. There was no wreckage nearby, no bodies, no other seats. Just trees and vines and the damp smell of soil and rot. She called out. Her voice sounded small. No one answered. She tried again. She shouted her mother's name. She shouted for help. The jungle absorbed the sound. Nothing came back. She did not cry. Not then. She later recalled feeling something closer to disbelief. She could not process what had happened. She remembered the storm. She remembered the spinning. She remembered the noise, but she could not connect those memories to where she was now. Her mind refused it. She unstrapped herself from the seat and stood again, more slowly this time. Her legs shook, but they held. She took a few steps. The ground was soft, covered in leaves and moss. She looked up and could barely see the sky. The canopy was too thick. She had no idea where she was. She had no idea if anyone else had survived. She found a small bag of candy in the torn pocket of her dress. She ate 1 piece. Her mouth was dry. She needed water. She walked a short distance and found a shallow depression in the ground where rainwater had pooled. She drank from it, her face pressed to the mud. The water tasted of earth, but it helped. She decided to move. She did not know which direction to go, but she remembered something her father had told her years before. If you are lost in the jungle, find water. Follow it downstream. Water always leads to larger water, and people live near rivers. She began to search for a stream. Juliane's injuries were severe, though she did not yet understand how severe. The broken collarbone made it painful to lift her right arm. The swelling around her eye had worsened. She could feel a gash on her calf, deep enough that it bled when she walked. Her feet were bare except for 1 sandal. The other had been torn away during the fall. Her dress was ripped and filthy. She had no supplies, no knife, no matches, no food. She walked slowly, scanning the ground. After some time, she found scattered debris, a piece of metal, a torn section of fabric. Then she found a row of seats, similar to the one she had fallen in. 3 passengers were still strapped in, motionless, heads slumped forward. She approached carefully. She did not need to check them closely. She could tell from the stillness, the angle of their bodies, that they were dead. She felt nothing, not horror, not sadness. Later, she would describe this as a kind of numbness, a mental shutdown that allowed her to keep moving. She searched the area for anything useful. She found no food, no water, no radio. She moved on. By the second day, she found a small creek. The water was clear and cold. She knelt and drank deeply. Then she began to follow it. The creek was narrow, sometimes only a few inches wide, but it moved downhill. She trusted it. She walked in the water when the banks were too overgrown. Her remaining sandal caught on roots and stones, so she discarded it. She walked barefoot. The jungle did not change. It was the same in every direction, green, damp, dense. The temperature never dropped, the humidity never broke. She walked for hours, then rested, then walked again. She had no sense of distance. She marked time only by the light, which filtered weakly through the canopy. When it grew too dim to see, she stopped. She lay down on the bank of the stream, her body pressed against the mud, and waited for morning. She did not sleep deeply. The jungle was loud at night. Things moved in the underbrush. Insects crawled over her skin. She brushed them away and lay still. On the third day, the creek widened. It joined with another small stream, and together they formed something larger, a narrow river, moving faster now, cutting through the trees. Juliane stayed with it. She waded when she could, walked along the bank when the current was too strong. Her feet bled. The cuts on her legs reopened. She ignored them. Her father's rule had been simple. Water flows to people. Rivers lead to settlements. It might take days, but it was the only reliable direction in a place with no landmarks. She trusted it. She had no other choice. She tried to eat. She found nothing she recognized as safe. There were fruits in the canopy, but they were too high. There were plants along the water, but she did not know which were edible. She had seen her parents identify dozens of species, but she could not remember the details. She drank often from the stream. Hunger became a constant ache, but thirst was more urgent. She drank and kept walking. The days blurred. She could not remember later whether it was the fourth day or the fifth when she found more wreckage. A section of fuselage had crashed into the trees near the river. She climbed up to it, moving carefully over roots and rocks. Inside, she found more bodies. The smell was overwhelming. Decomposition had begun quickly in the heat. She covered her nose and searched for supplies. She found nothing useful. She climbed back down and continued walking. She began to talk to herself, not in sentences, but in fragments. Reminders, instructions. Keep moving. Stay with the water. Don't stop. Her voice sounded strange, thin, like it belonged to someone else. She did not recognize it. The river grew wider. After several more days, it was 20 feet across, moving with enough force that she could no longer wade through it. She walked along the bank. The undergrowth was thick. Vines caught her arms. Thorns tore her skin. She moved slowly, methodically, pushing branches aside, stepping over roots. Her body had begun to weaken. She stumbled more often. Her vision blurred. She rested more frequently. She had lost track of time. She thought it had been 6 days, maybe 7. She could not be sure. On what she later believed was the 8th or 9th day, Juliane found another debris field. This one was larger. Pieces of the plane were scattered over a wide area. Twisted metal, shredded seats, personal belongings half buried in mud. She moved through it carefully. She found a bag of candy, similar to the one she had eaten on the first day. She ate it slowly, one piece at a time. Then she found more bodies. A row of seats had landed upside down, partially submerged in a shallow pool. 3 passengers were still strapped in, their heads underwater. She stood there for a long time, staring. She thought one of them might be her mother. She could not tell. The bodies were swollen, discolored. She did not touch them. She turned away and kept walking. She did not cry. She felt something, but it was distant, muffled. Later, she would describe it as a kind of floating sensation, as though her mind had separated from her body. She walked, she drank, she rested. She did not think beyond the next step. Her arm had begun to smell. The gash on her upper arm, which she had barely noticed in the first days, had become infected. She could see the wound clearly now, a deep cut, the edges swollen and red. Something was moving inside it. She touched the area carefully and felt a squirming sensation beneath the skin. Maggots. Fly larvae had entered the wound and were feeding on the tissue. She tried to remove them with her fingers. She could not. They were too deep. She pressed on the wound, trying to force them out. A few emerged, white and segmented. The rest stayed inside. The pain was sharp, but she kept pressing. Eventually, she gave up. She rinsed the wound in the river and kept walking. Her discipline did not falter. She did not allow herself to stop for long. She did not allow herself to imagine rescue. She focused only on the next hour, the next section of river, the next place to rest. Her mind narrowed. The world shrank to the width of the stream and the rhythm of her steps. By the 10th day, Juliane could no longer ignore the infection. Her arm had swollen badly. The skin was hot to the touch. The smell was worse. She could feel the maggots moving deep in the muscle. She had tried again to remove them, squeezing the wound, digging with her fingernails. She had managed to extract a few, but there were too many. The pain made her nauseous. She developed a fever. Her body shook even in the heat. She felt dizzy, disoriented. She could not always remember where she was or how long she had been walking. Time became unreliable. She would sit down to rest and lose hours. She would wake and not know if it was morning or afternoon. The river had grown wider still. It was now too wide to see across clearly. She stayed on one side, walking when she could, crawling when she could not. Her legs were weak. Her feet were raw, the skin peeled away in places, exposing red flesh beneath. Every step hurt. She moved slowly, sometimes only a few hundred feet in an hour. She began to hallucinate. She saw movement in the trees, figures that were not there. She heard voices calling her name. She stopped and listened, but the voices faded. She could not tell what was real. She drank from the river and lay down in the mud. She thought about stopping. She thought about simply staying where she was, letting the fever take her. It would be easier. But she did not stop. She stood up. She kept walking. The wound worsened. She could see bone in places where the maggots had eaten away the tissue. She knew this was dangerous. She knew infection could spread. She knew she might die from it. But she could not treat it. She had nothing. No tools, no medicine, no fire. She could only keep moving and hope. On the 11th day, she found something new. The river had widened into something that could almost be called navigable. The current was strong but steady. The banks were clearer here, less overgrown. And then, in the late afternoon, Juliane saw it. A boat. A small canoe, wooden, pulled up onto the bank. It was empty. There were no people nearby, but it was a human object, the first she had seen in 11 days. She approached it slowly, almost afraid it would disappear. She touched the wood. It was real, solid. Nearby, she found a path, faint but unmistakable. It led inland, away from the river. She followed it. After a short walk, she found a shelter. It was simple, just a roof of palm thatch and a raised platform, but it was clearly a camp. There were tools, a plastic container of fuel, a tarp. She sat down on the platform and waited. She did not know if anyone would come. She did not know how long she should wait. But she could not walk anymore. Her body had nothing left. She lay down on the platform and closed her eyes. She woke to voices. It was late afternoon, nearly evening. 3 men stood at the edge of the clearing, staring at her. They were loggers, workers who used the river to transport wood. They spoke Spanish. Juliane spoke Spanish. She tried to sit up, but her body would not cooperate. One of the men approached cautiously. He asked her what had happened. She told him, in broken sentences, that she had been in a plane crash. She told him she had walked for 11 days. The men did not believe her at first, but they saw her injuries. They saw the wound in her arm, the maggots still moving inside it. One of them poured gasoline into the wound. The maggots writhed and began to emerge. He pulled them out, one by one, more than 30 in total. She did not scream. She barely moved. The men gave her food. She ate a little, though her stomach could not handle much. They made a bed for her in the shelter. The next morning, they took her downriver in their canoe to a larger camp. From there, she was flown to a hospital in Koepcke. She had survived. Juliane Koepcke spent several weeks in the hospital. Her injuries healed slowly. The infection in her arm required surgery. Her broken collarbone was set. The cuts on her legs and feet were treated. She regained her strength gradually. She did not speak much about what had happened. When asked, she answered simply, without detail. Search teams had been deployed after the crash, but the wreckage was scattered over such a wide area that recovery took weeks. Eventually, all 91 other passengers and crew members were confirmed dead. Juliane was the sole survivor. Her mother's body was found several days after Juliane's rescue, still strapped into her seat, miles from where Juliane had landed. Juliane returned to Germany to finish her education. She studied biology, following in her parents' footsteps. She eventually earned a doctorate in zoology. She returned to Peru years later and continued her parents' work at the Panguana research station. She became a specialist in bats and neotropical ecology. She rarely gave interviews. When she did, she spoke carefully, without drama. She published a memoir decades later, describing the crash and the 11 days that followed. It was written plainly, with the same restrained tone she had maintained in every interview. She did not call herself a hero. She did not speak of miracles. She described what she had done. She had walked. She had followed water. She had kept moving. The jungle that nearly killed her became her life's work. She returned to it again and again, not as a survivor, but as a scientist. The forest did not owe her anything. It had not saved her. It had simply allowed her to pass through. She remained there, in the canopy's shadow, for the rest of her life.